Welcome to the talk show Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. The goal of this show is to provide a learning experience to people of all ages, with guests from various fields in academics, a wide range of industries, and insight into the many forms of art, athletics, and entertainment. We hope you enjoy the show. Television personality and Fox Sports talk show host Mike Hill is today's guest. Mike will talk about his varied experiences as a broadcaster and commentator.
Mike Hill, welcome to Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.
Thank you for having me, Mark. Appreciate it, man.
Sure, it's my honor. I have to tell you, many times I read things about the guests and it resonates with me. So I taught for 33 years, and my first 8 years were in the Bronx. And you were born in the Bronx. Yeah. So I know you're the sports guy. So back then, as a youngster, was sports a big part of your childhood?
Huge part of my childhood. That's where my love for the Yankees developed. Obviously, growing up a huge Yankee fan, and just my grandmother moved across the street from Yankee Stadium when I was 9 years old. It was a complete surprise to me. They didn't even tell me that we were moving across the street from Yankee Stadium because we lived about 5 miles down the road before. And then I just remember pulling up and saying, Yankee Stadium. And it's like, this is where we're going to be living. And so, yeah, I mean, that's where my love for the Yankees developed. And I once told my grandmother a long time ago that I was going to be working in Yankee Stadium. I thought I was going to be playing there, but I ended up working there covering the Yankees from 2000 to 2003. So it did, that dream did come true.
That's outstanding. The Yankees are a dynasty, but to live that close is really crazy. And so I had a friend years ago, I went to school with Charlie Slows, who I think is the voice for was the Washington Senators and Florida baseball team and a pro announcer. And I remember back in the day, I think he was like 12, he would write out the announcements of the hockey game. So it's always amazing to me. There's very few people in my life who I know who ever, as a child, wanted to do something and ended up doing it as an adult. So it wasn't exactly what you wanted, but it was in sports. But when did you first realizing that broadcasting was in your future?
That's a really good question. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I remember getting a cassette player, one of them old cassette players back in the day, and put the cassette in there. And I remember doing imitations of Howard Cosell. A lot of people don't even realize who Howard Cosell is, but way before there was a Stephen A. Smith, there's a Howard Cosell who was the preeminent sportscaster back in the 70s. And he used to always do that. This is Howard Cosell speaking sports, And I used to mock interviewing Muhammad Ali back in the day, okay, Howard, so I used to do those types of things. So I kind of had that gift then. But it wasn't until I was about 15 or 16 years old, and I actually saw a man that was on television when I moved to Alabama in Birmingham. His name was Michael Hill, and he was a news reporter. And I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I didn't even know, because back then you didn't see a lot of people on television who were in news that looked like me. And he looked like me, had my name, and he was in the same city, and he covered the news. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And ironically, I ended up dating and then later marrying his niece, which is crazy. It's just a wild story. And so, yeah, that was the first time I started considering it, because I had always wanted to be in some kind of form of entertainment. Like I said, I wanted to play, realized at an earlier age that I wasn't good enough to play, but entertainment, and I wanted to act. But at the time where I was, there wasn't a lot of acting facilities for me to kind of hone that craft. And I just kind of moved into it, pivoted into it. I wanted to do news at first because of him, but then I realized I have a love for sports, so I combined the two, and that's how I started.
That's great. That reminds me of Billy Crystal. When he started out, I saw him do fake interviews of Muhammad Ali as Howard Cosell. It was like left hook right there, Muhammad. I mean, it was just so funny with the hairpiece and all that stuff. So that's amazing. So, and I love the fact that you, unfortunately, for some of my viewers, you had to explain what a cassette player was. But that's how we always did fake interviews and things of that nature. So you bring something up. You said Michael Hill looked like you, sounded like you. So you've been doing this for a very long time. What was it like being a person of color who was trying to break into that kind of industry?
And even back then, it was difficult. But then again, it has been kind of up and down even throughout my almost 30-year career of being a person of color in this industry and how it's changed. I mean, there was a time when, they were looking for Black people to be on the air because there was a lack of diversity that was on television, especially Black men. There was a lack of Black sportscasters that were out there, so they were looking and whatnot. And that has kind of changed a lot over the years, where now they're looking, it kind of goes ebbs and flows, where they look for Latinos, they look for women, they look for, all different types, because there needs to be that type of diversity. I get that. But early on, it was difficult for me, only because growing up in the community I grew up in, I was born in New York, raised in Alabama, so I wasn't the most articulate person in the world. And I actually had to teach myself how to speak. My environment, I went into the military instead of going to a 4-year university. And I've had, news directors basically say, because I didn't have a college degree at the time, that they would never hire me, even though I had experience in the military, not going to school. So those were the difficulties. But being Black in this industry, once again, there's the good, obviously, but there's also some of the bad, because I also realized that early on that sometimes, even if they're looking for a Black sportscaster, so if there's a need for Black sportscasters early on, that if I was applying for a job at a station that already had a Black sportscaster, I wasn't getting that job. Because back then you would rarely see one, if any, but you definitely didn't see 2 Black sportscasters at the same job, whereas you would see 3 white men or 2 white men and a woman and all that type of stuff like that. But so that was the difficulty. Now, thankfully, things have changed over the years, but there's been ebbs and flows, highs and lows, man. But it's just, it's part of the process of just being a citizen in this country, in a sense, where, it's not just, exclusive to being a sportscaster. That's just how it is in society, period. But you adapt.
Right. And I want to talk about that adaptability for a minute, because transitioning and adaptability is so important in careers, but you had it early. I mean, I know how difficult it was for me as a teen. I was born in Yonkers, New York, and then I moved to Florida for 2 years and then came back to the New York area. But moving from New York, the Bronx, as we call it, to Alabama, that's not an easy transition. So I love the fact that you said you had to teach yourself how to speak. So walk me through that transition of how you improved yourself as a young person, even, and started to succeed even through that kind of move as a young adult.
I think there was also some, Mark, that was kind of innate in me. There was something like a drive that my grandmother always gave to me, growing up in New York. She just instilled, like, no matter what you are faced with in life, no matter what your obstacles or your circumstances, you can always overcome them. And it's up to you if you want to get it done, and don't ever settle. So she always made me believe in myself. And then I had a teacher in the 12th grade named Miss Knight, who also did the same thing for me, just made me really believe in myself. So even though there were obstacles of, like, growing up in a certain environment, not having a certain, people, seeing certain people that looked like you, that did things that you wanted to do, I always knew that there was a better life for me too. But, I listened to some of the criticism. I listened to some, even when I started dating Michael Hill's niece, and she later became my wife. And, he's on there, and I remember, him giving me some feedback about articulation and things like that. And, making sure I use the ing at the end of my words instead of going, instead of going, you know what I mean?
Right.
Or the th and all that type of stuff like that. So listening to that feedback kind of helped me out a lot, even though it was tough to kind of digest in the beginning, because you're being told what you can't do. Getting that feedback has helped me immensely to become the person I am. And it's a process still to this day. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. There are certain things that, even as a 54-year-old person that's been doing this for almost 30 years now, there are things that I need to still adapt to, like even social media and things like that. So that's just part of life. So it was early lessons that I got and difficulties that I got that just made me better. And this continues to make me continue to improve to this day.
Well, you talk about the ways to hone your craft, and articulation is certainly part of that. Now, when I see newscasters, there's articulation, but then I really have a special respect for sportscasters, because there's articulation, then there's knowledge. So, there's live broadcasting and sportscasting. So what do you do to keep up with that knowledge that you have to have at your hand, in your head immediately and consistently?
I am a student of sports. I love sports. I mean, like not just sports, but just politics and everything else that I get into. I am not only, that's not just my job, but it's a hobby of mine. It's a passion that I have. I love watching sporting events, even if I'm not there. I mean, I would, if I hit the lottery tomorrow, I'd still do my job for free because I have the best job in the world. I get to talk about sports for a living and make money for it, and make people happy one way or the other. Even if your team loses, it's not the end of the world, but I'm also making a fan base happy too, because I'm reporting that. I know it's changed a lot over the years because of, all the debate in your opinions and all that type of stuff like that, which is cool. And I understand we adapt to that, but I just stay up on everything, man. I read, obviously, look at social media. I look at, websites. I look at ESPN.com, Fox, and just the watching the games. You get so much out of it. Instead of looking at somebody else's opinion, I just kind of have my own when it comes to it. I used to, one of the things that I do miss since I've been at ESPN and at Fox, when I was in local markets, I used to be able to go inside the locker room and go and see, how these players are living and get the insights to that type of stuff like that. I have the access, but I don't have the need to go to the locker rooms anymore because I'm always in studio. But those guys come to the studio and I get a chance to catch up with them and talk to them as well. So I stay abreast of everything that's happening because I just want to, and I think that's what anybody in any job needs to do to be the best that they possibly can be.
Right. Well, you're always blessed if you can have a job that you're passionate about and you love. And I love the fact that you won 2 Sports Emmy Awards. But to me, the most telling award you can get in your field is Best Sportscaster for people who don't love sports.
Yeah.
So what do you bring to the table for people who aren't exactly sports enthusiasts?
I try and make it understandable for people that don't like sports. I try and break it down and give, analogies based on what you like or what goes on in society. I'll basically, and I remember one thing I was talking about Mariano Rivera and how great he was as a closer or whatever. I'm like, hey, just like you're at a sales meeting or whatever, and you got to bring in that one special guy that's going to get that pitch at the end. You already set the meeting up and everything's there. And now is that time for that spring in the closer to bring it home for us or whatever. And, you got that one guy you can always rely on. So I like that. That's why I think it makes guys like Colin Cowherd so good, because he can break sports situations down in a way in which the common man will be able to understand. So I like to make it fun too, man. Sports is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be the end of the world. Like I said, I want to make somebody happy. I want to make, somebody's day. I do want to give my opinion, but at the same time, man, I want to entertain. Man, I think part of my job and anything that I do, not just sportscasting, is just to entertain and to enlighten and to give you the knowledge that you need. So if I can give you knowledge and I can break it down to make you understand it, even if you don't understand sports, and entertain and enlighten you, then I'm doing my job.
That's a great philosophy. And as an educator, that really resonates with me. And I've taught a lot of kids and even adults executive function and time management. And I'm looking at all the things you're doing. And if my math is correct, you probably have time to sleep about 40 minutes a day. Yeah. So I have to ask you, how do you have the time to run your production company, Thrill of Entertainment?
I find time. I find time for myself. I'm time management. I have, gotten older, and I realize that there are certain people that, may take up some of your time that probably shouldn't take up your time. I've cut down my circle when it comes to trying to please a lot of people, and I manage my time wisely. I get my sleep in when I need to. I take a little nap here and there, whatnot, but at the same time, it's like when I got to take care of business, I'll take care of business. And time efficiency. And once again, that's where the military training came in. Right. Just time management, of just making sure that I'm on time, that I'm not taking days off. I do take my rest. I do take my mental health days. I do that efficiently, only because I feel like if you overload yourself and you got so much on your plate, then even when you are busy, you're not going to be able to do your job effectively. So I want to be able to not only do my job, but I want to be able to do it effectively. So that's why I take my rest and also take care of myself and make sure that the people in my life are supposed to be in my life and they're not depleting me in any kind of way.
Wow. That's great. And I'm not always the biggest fan of social media, but I've seen it permeated on social media the past couple of years. Get rid of the people who aren't worthy of your time. And it's not about they're not as good as you, but that they drain you and not really adding anything. And, you didn't get to where you are overnight. On my show, we often talk about the story behind the glory. So what obstacles did you have to overcome to attain success?
Plenty, man. I mean, like, I think just growing up in my environment, once again, and we talked about that earlier, and not being able to, not seeing people, and even some of the people that you grow up with, telling you that you can't do certain things. Though that's the first obstacle that I had to get over. But luckily, once again, I had a grandmother and a mom who believed in me, and a teacher who believed in me and said that I can do anything I want to despite my circumstances. And that's one of the bigger reasons why I want to go back and build in my community and let people know that, hey, if I made it out of this community, you can too. Obviously there's certain things that, I don't let it hold me back, but obviously we do have, issues still in this country when it comes to racism. And I've experienced some of that somewhat, in certain ways, and not necessarily very overt, but just in different little tangents, where, I've been told that I'm too ghetto. I've been told that, that I'm too black in a sense, or I need to, change my style a little bit, even though it's just who I am, and I'm trying to entertain. I'm just trying to be myself. And I've told I need to act more like this black person instead of this black person, so I've had to go through those types of things. And then a lot of obstacles I got to put on myself. I'm a person who believes in being very transparent and also self-evaluating myself and understanding that there are a lot of things, a lot of difficult situations that I put myself in that I've had to overcome. So I'm not just going to put the onus on other people. That's just life. There are people out there who have to go through difficulties in their lives all the time. White men have to go through some difficulties in their lives. White women, Black women, like Latinos, there's something that somebody feels like is in their way that they have to overcome. So even though it's there, it's part of life. And what I've learned is that my difficulties have made me stronger. They've made me better. So the fact that I was able to overcome that means that when things are great, then I can cruise a little bit, but I also learned a lesson on how not to go back to it. So I'm very thankful for all the difficulties that I had to experience in my life to get to the place where I am right now.
I love that answer also because it leads me to my next question, which is, especially for people who are new in a career, want to change careers, how do you find the balance, Mike, between I need this gig and they want me to be more this, less that? And how do you balance that with, but this is who I am over here? How did you find that balance? And when do you pick and choose? No, I'm not going to compromise on this. Okay, I'll give a little on that. How do you find that balance?
That's a really good question. I've had to deal with that a lot because I guess once you get to a certain age, you just like, hey, this is just who I am. Man. You like it, you like it. You don't, then, you become like a curmudgeon in a sense, but like, hey, this is me. Like you take it or leave it or whatever. But I also realized that I've had to adapt in certain ways, like I said, to embrace a little bit more social media and posting things on Instagram and all that type of stuff. Like, that's not necessarily me. I've had to adapt to sportscasting being, hey, X's and O's, showing highlights, being entertaining, to like now having an opinion and basically taking a side against somebody and having the whole debate thing. And it was hard for me to embrace that at first, but now I'm trying to embrace it a little bit more. But what I want to do is I'm not going to go to the line where I'm going to overly criticize somebody when it comes to a work ethic or something like that, or things that I don't know. I can actually put the onus on myself and tell those stories, like I said, and say, hey, this is the equivalent of this or whatever. And this is my opinion of this, not knowing a lot, but here's how I feel about it, and have more of a conversation about it instead of a yelling match going back and forth, a screaming match going back and forth. So adapting to it has been tough, but once again, you have to do something like that. But at the end of the day, I tell people all the time when I'm talking to young sportscasters or even broadcasters, period, be yourself. There's only one you. There is no one else who has your DNA. You're unique to everybody else out there. Find what your voice is and stick with it. I tell the story all the time when I was at ESPN that I lost my identity for a couple of years while I was there, and I hated it. Because I was, once again, you get scared. You want to keep your job. You want to keep the balance. You don't want people, you want to move up. You want to do that or whatever, but at what cost? So you have to kind of figure that out for yourself. What cost is it going to take for me to basically move up, but at the same time still hold on to who I am and make sure that I can look myself in the mirror and know, hey, I'm still who I am. I'm not selling out for, a job or an opportunity.
Right. And that's such important advice because cost is sometimes too often compared with, or just in the terms of money. And the cost you're talking about goes so far beyond that. So I do want to, because this really did inform who you are today. So I do want to turn the clock back a little bit. First of all, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
But I also would like to hear a little bit more about your military service, what you learned, what you experienced, and what you took from that and brought into the sportscaster world of Mike Kelly.
Well, I was in the Air Force for 6.5 years. I needed to go into the Air Force. I wasn't ready for college. Even though I was a good student, I wasn't a disciplined student. And if I would have gone to college, I think I would have just gone there for a year, just messed around, gone to frat parties or whatever, and not really gone to class. You mean to tell me nobody's going to wake me up and tell me to go to school, go to class? Hey, I think I'm going to sleep in.
Right.
I didn't have the discipline at the time, even though once I was there, I would do the work. So going into the military was great for me because it actually gave me the discipline that I needed. Obviously, you got to go to work or you're going to get in trouble. You got to do certain things a certain way. It taught me teamwork. It taught me about leadership. It taught me about being on time. It taught me so much that I still instill to this day, just leading by example and respecting, a hierarchy or whatnot. But at the same time, still working hard so that you can reach that hierarchy. So if you need to do it differently, you can do it differently as well. So I don't fold my underwear in 6-inch squares anymore. But at the same time, I still fold a certain way. I still make up my bed a certain way. I still, believe in being on time. And if I'm not going to be on time, make sure that I'm going to communicate with somebody about not being on time. You know what I'm saying? So those are the things that, man, I think the military has made me just a better person and giving me that building block or that foundation that, once again, it's been 30 years since I got out, but I still have it as part of my DNA to this very day. And I think I'll have it until the day I die.
Well, certainly all that you've learned in the military, has added to your life because your bio reads like there's actually 3 people in your body at once. Because how do you go from being an analyst providing reports to the CIA and the FBI, and then you know what? Now it's sportscaster. So is there any crossover? Like, are you hiding any pro sports secrets we're supposed to know? So how does that work?
I wish I was. So when I was in the military and I worked at, I got a top secret clearance. I was radio communications analyst specialist, which kind of, I can tell you this, I gave communication to spy planes. So I made sure that they were safe. And then when I got to Fort Meade, Maryland and worked at NSA, they started this program because they found I was in school, going to school for broadcasting. I had an internship at the Fox affiliate in Baltimore, and they knew about this, and they said they wanted to start this program where inside NSA, instead of giving the boring reports, we're going to do a newscast, and we want you to be the anchor. And so I had me, and we had like 2 other co-anchors or whatnot. And so we would write the scripts instead of the reports. We'd write the scripts. A beautiful studio. They had a gorgeous studio. They had spent some money on that studio. Mm-hmm. And we go in there and we sit at the desk and we'd read the news, just like Tom Brokaw back in the day, or Peter Jennings and all those people were. Walter Cronkite was, well, he wasn't, I think. No, this was Dan Rather. Rather at the time. But so we would do it that way. But the great thing about what we were doing would be like, we'd report certain news aspects 2 weeks before Dan Rather would, you know what I mean? Because we actually had some insights. So it would go out to the CIA, FBI, the president, all these different entities or whatever. Instead of just giving those briefings, we do it in news forms and it would just be piped out over a secure system. So that gave me my basis of actually doing this. Obviously, I couldn't use those tapes as resume tapes or whatever. But it gave me, once again, a foundation of being able to sit at a desk and being able to be in charge as an anchor. Wow.
Well, such a big history, and you're still making history and moving forward. But I have to ask you, because you're so lazy, with the extra time you have, of 40 minutes of sleep is all you can probably get. How do we get into stand-up comedy?
Wow. Oh, wow. Yeah. And just the evolution, man. I've always, like I said, I like to entertain, man. I like to have fun. There's a different side of me. There's a professional side of me, and then there's that goof off, wacky, crazy, just nonchalant kind of vulgar side too. And it's all a part of me. I can be professional, but at the same time, I can be kooky as hell. So I got into stand-up comedy because I've always just loved comedy. And most of my friends that are out here are comedians. My cousin is a well-known comedian, D.L. Hughley. He's, I guess, is part of the family. And then my family's kind of funny too, and just growing up. So I used to always do these podcasts. I would have them on my shows, like, when I had a news show or whatever, sports, and they'd come on the show in the set and do something fun segments or whatever. And so they would, return the favor and have me on their shows as well when they would do the podcast. And I went on this one particular podcast and they just kept saying, man, you funny. Like, you ever thought about doing stand-up? And I'm like, man, look, I'm too nervous. I don't want to do the stand-up. I'm like, that's your thing. And then there's this one lady named Hope Flood, who is my mentor, and I love her to death. She was on Def Comedy Jam back in the day. She's a well-known comedian here in LA. And she said, well, why don't we do this? She said, I'm going to do a show at this comedy place called the Ice House out here in Pasadena. This was last year. And she said, I want you to host it. And you host it, you bring the comedians on stage. And if you like it, just tell some jokes in between. And I did it. I fell in love with it. And it's been a year later. And I've been at the Comedy Store. I've been at the Laugh Factory. I've been at the Improv a couple of times. So it's just been incredible, man, an incredible journey. And now I want to take it to the next level.
That's great. And if history tells us anything, whatever you want to do, you're going to do. So I just have to say in closing, Mike Hill, thank you so much for being today's guest, sharing your incredible journey with us. For all those watching, I hope Mike's journey has shown you that following your passion is not always easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. So remember, you have the power to make positive changes in your own life as well as the lives of others. We'd love to hear from you, so stay connected with us on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to follow us for the latest episodes and updates and exciting new content. Mike Hill, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. To contact Marc, email him at info@lifestorieswithmarchoberman.com or visit him on social media through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.